11 o'clock, so we'll crack into it now. Welcome everyone to the ArcGIS and Emergency Management webinar. We're really excited to cover this space in a short amount of time, given how much activity is going on across the country. So we'll just start off with a little bit of an introduction of who we are, how to participate, and what we'll be covering in this session. So I'll hand over to Andrew to introduce himself.
Thanks, Ed. Hi, I'm Andrew Wilson. I'm the GIS support lead here at Eagle, as well as involved in the Eagle DRP team, and also involved in GMA as well.
Really important fact about Andrew is he's based in Invercargill too, and that's the trend of your presenters today. I'm based down here in the mainland here in Christchurch. My name's Ed Cook and I'm a Senior Solution Engineer at Eagle Technology. I also work in the Disaster Response Program that you can see up here on the top left. This is a squad that we have across the company to help out in your times of need, make sure that we can coordinate and ramp up support for when you need it most. So just a high-level objective of what we're looking to cover today. Really, we're looking to explore just some of the ways that ArcGIS and location intelligence and also emergency management focused solutions can help manage emergencies in New Zealand. So how are we going to do that? I'm going to hand over to Andrew to give us a brief rundown of our today's agenda.
Cheers. So today we're going to understand what ArcGIS is first, then look how we can use it when preparing for emergencies with ArcGIS and the tools that we have available to do this. Real-time response and coordination is quite a key component, we feel. So we're going to look at how the tools that we have available can assist us with this. Damage assessment and recovery is another key function that where we see that ArcGIS can come into a real good use case here. And then we'll follow up with some great case studies of the good work that everyone's doing in this space. And then we'll have time at the end to go through any questions that you guys have. Please ask questions throughout the webinar today. And you can do that by going to the top panel up here. There's a Q&A tab. So click on that and message out your question, and we'll answer them at the end.
Cool. So before we get into the domain itself and starting to unpack some of these really awesome activities and workflows across the 4 R's of disaster risk reduction, we just wanted to give you a bit of a primer on ArcGIS, the system that we're seeing used heavily across this space. So in this section, we're just going to be covering a little bit of the ArcGIS platform and system, and really bringing in some of these key components like ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Pro, and ArcGIS Enterprise. So we recognise that people who attend this webinar in particular come from a broad range of backgrounds in this sector. So we just wanted to make sure we got off on the right step with our understanding of some of these key terms, including what is GIS? GIS is this system, approach, science, it's a method that allows you to bring together the natural and built environment, information about both of those aspects, and combine them using, at its most basic form, layers to structure all this information to be able to compare different aspects from both of these domains and produce insight, the single pane of glass that you can look through to understand the relationship of how different things are related to one another. And particularly in emergency management, and that's really important for shared awareness, given all the overlapping activities that are often happening across all phases of disaster risk reduction. So for example, in response, imagine the value of being able to look at your reports, your sensors, your different incidents, overlaying that on where your people are that are responding, what their jobs are, different assets that they're drawing upon, being able to then look at relevant addresses that are flagging the need for assistance. Looking at different boundaries, different jurisdictions of who's operating where, so you can be coordinating effectively. Then understanding maybe some of the explanatory factors to some of the impacts that you're seeing. So things like soil type, looking at air quality, looking at things like elevation and terrain, to really bring together that holistic view of what's going on. And I guess the key factor here that makes it different from a whole lot of other systems is we're displaying this on a map. So rather than looking at different databases and different sources of truth in disparate areas, imagine combining them all together into a way that you can visualize and understand the where to the what and the who and the why. So ArcGIS supports many implementation patterns. It's a system that's built to do what we've just described, but at scale and in flexible workflows. So underpinning it is your geospatial infrastructure, whether that's ArcGIS Online if you're a software as a service, or ArcGIS Enterprise if you're leveraging servers. Then you've got desktop, mobile apps, and web apps as the mechanism of how you're accessing this. Are you accessing it through a browser, through your mobile device, or are you accessing it through ArcGIS Desktop using tools like Pro and AllSource? So really, wherever you are, whatever workflow you're doing, you can be leveraging the central geospatial infrastructure to support a whole lot of workflows across your organization. And we call this an enterprise system for a reason. Whether it's mobile workers out in the field, executives needing a summary, your desktop analysts, like on the bottom left-hand corner, really deep diving into sources and producing outputs through analysis to drive the rest of the organization's understanding. ArcGIS is a system that supports these mission-critical workflows and applications across a variety of different sectors at different levels across our country and beyond. One thing we wanted to keep in mind is those core components continue to evolve and expand. GIS, we're seeing large innovations in multiple different areas all at once. So these are really important to keep in mind, given all the different workflows that we have in place and the different factors and different activities different people are needing to do. So whether that's interactive and real-time maps, whether that's performing imagery and remote sensing, reporting and storytelling that we'll cover in a second, even geodesign and capturing information in a central place from wherever you are. So ArcGIS really pulls this all together with the different activities that support across the different emergency management phases of disaster risk reduction. So this life cycle of how we're reusing information across the different phases to provide value. So let's start with readiness. Having plans that are derived from all of these sources, really rich understanding and data-driven, using the information for exercises to prepare for the next event and into heightened monitoring. Then we go into response. So being able to use this information and our reference information with event information overlaid on top of it to provide context, shared and situational awareness, being able to analyze impact preemptively based on what we already have before we have new sources coming into StreamUp, being able to share this information out in public products or even to other stakeholders using ArcGIS online groups if we don't want to share the information publicly. It's maybe critical information to drive a decision of another agency, but maybe not information that's relevant for the public. And then being able to perform damage assessment at scale as we go into recovery, looking at where the need is and seeing how much we've been able to restore and meet those needs, not just for the social environment with welfare, but also with our assets as well. Being able to manage all the impact that's happened out there from the lens of debris. We think about analysing impact to a building. Well, if there's a higher level of impact to a building, there's probably a high level of debris, both interior and exterior, that may be to be managed. So how do we report that in a way that makes sure that we're putting all of this and coordinating the effort to remove all that debris in a way that's managed, safe and effective? Then going back into adapting into the new normal. So that reduction phase, being able to use all this information that we've gained through an event to help recalibrate and realign to the new normal. Being able to look at hazard mitigation and operationalize those plans in a way where we're putting flood protection and the likes, understanding critical infrastructure exposure and risk. All of this feeding in to update our plans and make us more effective to respond next time. So I'm now going to hand over to Andrew to kickstart our journey at looking at some of the key patterns and trends of ArcGIS and emergency management, particularly for reduction and readiness. So with that, I'll hand over to you, Andrew.
Cheers, Ed. So yeah, with respect to the 4R, the reduction and readiness, so that preparing stage. So how can we look at preparing for emergencies using ArcGIS? First, we'll look at the risk analysis and education. So education and awareness around hazards and risks and how we map the hazards and critical infrastructure. So we need to look at identifying those vulnerable areas This will give us a better understanding on what our likely impacts are, as well as our priorities in an event, so where our attention is needed. So if we move to understanding the risk, one way we can look into this is using the risk equation. So where risk is defined as the interactions of hazards with the vulnerability and exposure of human and natural systems. So by identifying those vulnerable areas, for example, flood zones, as a mitigation, we tend to build stop banks as critical infrastructure to mitigate the potential of flooding. But also in New Zealand here, we do tend to build our towns, our cities around these around riverways and coastal environments. So using those flood zones as an example. Another example is the tsunami risk, where we identify those zones and then we look to have a plan to mitigate if it were to happen, like moving to a higher ground and not going sightseeing at the beach. That leads us into education. So a big influence for mitigating some of the hazards is education. So this is where we look at how we can provide information from our spatial analysis in a way that we can educate our communities. One way of doing this is telling a story. I want to highlight a fantastic example here is what Alice and the team at AF8 have done with their use of story maps to share the scientific data to explain the hazard risk, not if, but when the Alpine Fault has its next major seismic activity. So if you haven't already checked it out, I highly recommend going and having a look, seeing how you could also use something similar in your own local area and share your own localized knowledge with your own community. Moving through from the education is also building that awareness of hazards. Again, fantastic work's already been done in this space by the regional councils throughout New Zealand. We've got a few examples here from Southland to Northland and Otago as well. But by providing this hazard information that is available to ratepayers, as well as other key stakeholders, people can make informed decisions, but they're also aware of the potential hazards that may impact them at some stage. Moving through some mapping hazards and critical infrastructure. So part of that, building on that awareness, now we look to understand what exposure and proximity we have. We can calculate risk based on criticality, so how critical infrastructure is, and what's the scenario if we don't have that. So overline those pre-existing hazard information with asset locations to look into that. Lifelines. This is where we start to touch on that lifelines at a local level. What are those key lifeline infrastructure? Want to touch on KiwiRail here. So KiwiRail have published an open data set of their assets, but it doesn't just have the asset information. It's also got risk ratings with it, which is fantastic. So we can automatically see how KiwiRail deem their higher risk zones in their network. So this data set's available through Living Atlas. And over time, we would love to see other critical infrastructure providers making this type of information available, as it has a huge benefits for GIS and emergency management, being able to pull that data from that core source. So the poor local GIS analyst doesn't have to go and maintain and update that data set all the time. It can be just pulled through and it's dynamic. So with that, I'll hand back to Ed to talk about the planning and exercises. So once we have that information and we've identified those vulnerable areas and those hazards, how can we plan and run exercises to test some of that knowledge that we've gained?
Awesome, thanks for that, Andrew. And yeah, there's so much information that's created in the reduction space that it's really neat to see applications of it going into readiness and beyond. So we'll be focusing on those emergency plans and those emergency scenarios, how you can simulate them before they happen, or even model the worst case scenario to really make your plan fit. So we're going to start off with simulating emergency scenarios, given that there's an exciting new advancement and one of the bits of the ArcGIS system being ArcGIS Pro that really elevates the level of how granular and how interactive you can make this. So I wanted to just call out the ArcGIS Pro flood simulation tool, which is a capability to allow you to have geodesign at the forefront of how you're preparing for flood events in particular. So this isn't replacing existing flood modeling software that's out there. You can leverage off the outputs of that and feed it in to have local level discussions around inundation, whether it's fluvial, pluvial, or coastal in its source, to then work around how do you mitigate that risk? What are some options that then you could model in your engineering software at a larger scale to make sure that you're preparing for those different scenarios and model different inundation events. So your GIS analysts, for all those emergency managements out there, your GIS analyst probably has access to this. So go and tap them on the shoulder in the office and have a chat around maybe how this capability could help you simulate and test some of your plans that you have for this type of hazard. Really touching upon the great points Andrew made earlier around education. Educating about hazards is fantastic, and we can take that to the next level without actually having that narrative around the plan that we're going to put in place to respond to that risk, to either mitigate, eliminate, or isolate it through a community response plan or even an agency level plan. And we love story maps as a method to do this, given that it translates what's otherwise a Word document that you have to cognitively relate to the environment. Imagine relating that to all the maps, all the 3D products you're creating, all the associated media, being able to actually relate that a lot more easily and make it more impactful to be able to remember and act upon when required to do so. So think about story maps maybe as an option for your next emergency plan. We use it in-house at the Disaster Response Program as our pre-plan, and we're aware of search and rescue groups starting to leverage this too, to take all that awesome reference information from national agencies and regional providers and provide that really rich pre-plan of the operating environment to help them be more effective in their next call out. Whether it's knowing who owns the key to unlock the gate at the end of the farm road, to what the vegetation cover is of an area where people frequently go missing. There's a lot of really rich detail that you can bring into something like a story map to really make a whole lot of complexity a lot clearer to understand and act upon. And going into exercising and callouts, the closest thing we can get to the real thing is running an exercise. Whether it's a tabletop or a nationally significant exercise like we saw recently with Exercise Ruwhenua, I'm really looking at that AF8 type scenario and testing our capacity to respond and our capability to respond. So it's so very heartening to see from the local level, incident, regional, and also the national level, the use of GIS to provide that shared awareness in day one and onwards during Ruwhenua. So a big shout out to all those who were involved, really enabling their agencies to elevate their decision making using a digital view of what the situation was. We've had heaps of feedback on the good work that you've been doing just through our own BAU work. So just keep up the good job wherever you are using GIS to help really test your agency's capacity to respond. And this goes into our next section of the webinar, which is really focused around real-time response and coordination. So starting to bridge that gap between preparing to actually going in and responding for real or no duff for those in the tactical space. So before we get into that, we wanted to just really focus on one of the the really important aspects of any response and coordination, the fact that we've got multiple levels of an incident depending on how severe and widespread it is. And really the importance of all these levels working together and the value of where we see ArcGIS time and time again in many of our incidents that we're responding to across the country. And really the value of each of these levels and what they provide, both up the chain in terms of reporting, but also what they can share down at a lower level to really take the pressure off one of your other partners having to maintain that source of truth. ArcGIS provides those collaborative abilities for sharing incident data across different levels. At the community level, starting to identify observations and resources, having crowdsourcing, structuring those observations into a place that it can be immediately used at an incident level and above. Looking at resources as well, really people being able to communicate what they have to help respond to that need. At the incident level, this is where we see the granular information around asset status, cordons, checkpoints, and taskings. All of this is maintained through an incident management team, and being able to share that up to inform maybe multiple incidents happening at once across a local area is something ArcGIS can do very easily and simply using groups and a really good data structure. At the local level, starting to look higher beyond just an incident and beyond the outer cordon. Really the focused effort here, some of the trends we see are reconnaissance information, building assessments, rotor status and asset status, building that picture of how you're responding at a larger local level than just an independent incident. When the events get really big and we see activations and declarations of multiple local areas, that's where that regional view comes in. That's really important to coordinate a finite pool of resource and understand that widespread need and try and match that supply and demand. So producing regional summaries, detailed welfare assessments, and also lifeline status in a way that produces that really strong digital twin of what's going on across an area that a civil defence group is responsible for. And then, unfortunately, with the rise in frequently events, we have national level activation and declaration at times. And being able to produce from all of these independent, maybe hundreds of individual incidents, 67 local authorities, and then at that national level, producing those totals and being able to identify status. So we see pictures of these different things in action down on the bottom of your screen, going from the incident control point, incident management teams, emergency operation centres, emergency coordination centres, and then those national coordination centres. Being able to have the shared view of what's going on and being able to collaborate with all these different sources each party makes available. So situational awareness is one of those key workflows that we see demonstrating what we've just covered with those different incident levels. Being able to facilitate real-time data collection, share live data feeds and dashboards that each party is contributing to the picture. So let's start with real-time data collection. Think about the sensor networks that you have on a day-to-day basis that are already out there that you could be integrating. We've seen great success with some regions out there starting to bring in river gauge information, looking at flow and stage. Bring in CCTV feeds where you have them, maybe for key areas where there's elevated risk that you want to keep an eye on. Then also the other side of it, which is the specific task collection, tasking folk to go out and look at an area that a sensor's maybe reporting an irregularity. So ArcGIS Quick Capture is a way to quickly capture all of that information using a common tool that then can feed and stream into dashboards, like the one you can see on the right-hand side there. We also have Survey 123 as a means to facilitate that crowdsourcing, members of the public being able to log into a website, or not even log in, just load a browser tab and submit what they're seeing to help build that combined intelligence picture across an area. So dashboards are one of these critical tools that allow you to sense make what's otherwise a lot of noise in the map. And we're really lucky to see a rise of ready-to-use sources that people are putting into their dashboards to help illustrate that impact across a wide area. One we haven't mentioned in the slide, but we wanted to call out is GNS, Geological and Nuclear Sciences, producing their shaking layers similar to what we see from the US Geological Survey into ArcGIS Online, into a variety of different products to be able to inform where it is and the widespread impact from a seismic event. So big shout out there. Alongside that, we have Waka Kotahi providing their state highway information into a feed that we know a lot of you are using already. as well as Met Service making available their severe weather alerts through the Common Alerting Protocol. This is a common XML format that we've been able to provide through ArcGIS for a number of years now, being able to illustrate over the top of everything that we care about where a severe weather warning extends, to be able to sense make what the potential impact may be as a result of these yellow, orange, and sometimes red warnings. Another source that's become available is GeoGlows that we just wanted to call out. It was shown on the previous slide, but this is a worldwide service that provides a 6 to 10 day forecast of river flow compared to the mean in majority of large catchments globally. This models rainfall into a catchment and then applies that to what the estimated flow rate will be in a river. And so where you don't have flood gauges set up, it might be a really valuable source to tap into to infer maybe where there may be black swan events in the case of things that we haven't been able to foresee or prepare for in certain catchments that maybe we don't have sophisticated infrastructure set up to model. So then we get into resource allocation. We've understood the need. We can see things as they're happening and unfolding. We're probably getting to the point of tasking assets where we haven't pre-deployed them. So then it's really critical to be able to track what they're doing and where they are and whether they're safe, and also optimize how they're going to get there. So tracking resources and personnel, we see two patterns here. We either see using tools like ArcGIS Workforce, a very rapid tool to stand up to coordinate specific activities and tasks through a spatial to-do list. But then we also see extended workflows where maybe the process is prescribed down to a very detailed level. And so a workflow is being built around tracking where the need is, who we have available, what tasks they have assigned to them, and managing the life cycle of that task and then the resource then being demobilized. And so a big shout out to INSARAG, the International Search and Rescue Secretariat under UN OCHA from the United Nations, and Foreign Emergency, who for a number of years have maintained, built and enhanced a system called ICMS, the Incident or the INSARAG Coordination Management System. This has been used in large events like the Turkey earthquake, the Beirut blast in the port that covered a large area of impact of damaged structures, a large shockwave from just having certain materials in a certain place that are exposed to something else at a certain time. And also for our recent reclassification of our International Search and Rescue Group, NZL1. So this is a tool that's used to inform what urban search and rescue is doing around the world. And we're so very proud to have had New Zealand specialists like Jeff Maunder and Aidan Elliott and others contribute their expertise to the development of this and ultimately saving lives. So really the messaging at a wider level here is that there are a large amount of capabilities available for data capture, planning and coordinating your workforce. We'll talk about data capture in a little bit more detail in a second. And enterprise integration, we recognise that folk aren't just using one system to manage their events. Just like it's a whole lot of stakeholders around the table coordinating, there's a whole lot of systems there as well. Commonly, we see Microsoft used heavily across the board. We also see other systems like D4H used in some areas of the country too. And what's great is that we're able to integrate between these using APIs and even off-the-shelf capability, like seeing the introduction of ArcGIS with inside Microsoft Teams, being able to be on a Teams call like this and sharing a map to provide awareness at the same time. And really that's the theme of all of this. We're really wanting to produce situational and shared awareness of what everyone's doing to really drive heightened decision making. So one thing that does come into consideration is making sure anyone who we have as a resource working to support our shared response to an event is making sure they can get there effectively and easily. And so this is really talking about optimizing emergency response routes, both before and after an event. So analysis we've seen used by some agencies to look at frequently used high usage routes across certain locations and being able to use that as an engagement tool to make sure they're not inhibited, maybe through a lack of awareness. For example, putting a speed bump in an area that's frequently used by emergency service vehicles. So that's a really great decision tool to help ensure those routes stay open and clear and able to be used to get to those in need. But it also helps to identify those bottlenecks and those priority routes that maybe need to be restored post-event. So we've seen great work done down here in Te Waipounamu, the South Island by AF8, really having that conversation across all stakeholders, using a map at the centre of it to identify where the priority routes are for restoration after an event. One workflow we saw with Cyclone Gabriel in particular was actually doing this in real time, identifying isolated communities and what the recommended routes are between those. So really redirecting assets in the middle of an event using all that damage impact information to produce obstacles, and then using the smarts of GIS, like ArcGIS Pro's Network Analyst tool, to arrive what's the most effective route, so we can continue to produce our service delivery results that are needed at a more heightened level during an event. So I'm now going to hand over to Andrew to talk around that damage assessment and recovery space, going into that response in the early stages of recovery. Andrew.
Awesome, thanks, Ed. So yeah, that response and recovery phase. So at this phase, information is key. So we're needing to assess the damage and impact. Where is that need? So that's that locational base, that where. So we can use a couple other techniques as well, like remote sensing. So this is where drone and satellite imagery can also be incorporated as part of that to paint that picture. So assessing damage and impact, we all know that situational awareness is a necessity, but we can look at a couple of different options here. Our primary objective is to identify where that need is, though. So to do that, we can use field applications like Quick Capture, designed for that rapid response. You could be in a car driving down a road or a street, recording data along, or in a helicopter, surveying an area, banging some points down for follow-up that's maybe required later on. Then we can use field maps for that contextual information. So where critical infrastructure is, where our flooding, for example, could be. But we can use it in future for tasking. So looking at tasks and using it to deploy our field operations. So that would be their guide to knowing what's happening on the ground, but also where they're needed next. And then following into that, we can use Survey 123 for that assessment. So that's that more detailed information. So we're looking at those building assessments coming in through to see the scale of damage that's happened. All this information feeding into a dashboard to give that situational awareness allows us for that prioritization of resources where they're needed most, and you could use that best bang for buck saying. I want to highlight what Fens have done here. So with their COP, so their Common Operating Platform, is a fantastic example of this. So they're referencing how they're capturing incident level data and then showing it automatically in a national view. So they have that picture of where their resources are or where they're needed. So following in from those field applications that we can use, we can also use remote sensors or remote sensing technology. So this graph here sort of outlines where the scenarios where you could use each one, noting that information is key. So any information that we can have earlier on is important. but for the scale. So if it's a large scale response, then satellite's going to be a key operating or key piece of information. But we can also use drones for those critical assets that we've got that we need to check on, or a site-specific location. And then we could also use handheld cameras from Survey 123 or Quick Capture as well, and CCTV. Imagery speaks 1,000 words, so it's got immense value throughout a response and into that recovery stage to tell that story. So when we look at using drone and satellite imagery, for drones, we can use applications like ArcGIS Flight and SiteScan, which enable an end-to-end pilot capturing and processing, which is, and it's critical for getting information into ArcGIS Online as well. One thing I'll touch on here is the satellite. So we're lucky here actually in New Zealand, and LINZ do lead a lot of satellite procurement of imagery during a response. But we're going to look at ISI here, which is a relatively new player. They've been around, what, a couple of years, Ed? And they use synthetic aperture radar. So they've got a couple of different products, one looking at wildfire, but another product looking at flight insights. So not only can they give you a flood extent, but they've also got the ability to give you a flood depth as well. So looking at the depth of water, and it's ArcGIS Online ready. So it's easily shared as a premium content in ArcGIS Online to add into your applications as well. And once we have all that information, we need to then use it to make decisions. And one way we do that is reporting. So looking at those sit reps, how can we create those reports and maps? But then how do we share it with stakeholders and the public as well to make those decisions? So creating detailed reports and maps. So we know that sit reps are a key task during a response and recovery. But how we can do that is through a variety of different options. So we could use infographics using the business analyst widget and experience builder to show us that situation. We could use layouts in Pro, so have a sit rep map ready to go that we can just hit print, or we could do screenshots of a dashboard if we want to. But we're wanting to take a snapshot of the current situation. And the key word there is probably snapshot. We've had examples before where there'll be processes, say a sit rep's ready for 4 p.m. Processes will be kicked off at 1 p.m. to update the data and everything to be ready by that 4 p.m. sit rep, only for it to be out of date 5 minutes later. So we're wanting to pull this information that you're using in those sit reps from live data sources. So it can be just as simple as a copy and paste, take a screenshot and slap it into a sit rep. We want the ability for it to be self-service. If we're feeling confident that we can schedule and automate these, then fantastic. But we want to keep it as simple as we possibly can with the latest and greatest data that we've got available to us. So try and keep that simple. Then combining all of this, so not only at the response and recovery phase, but the reduction in readiness. We talked about education earlier on, sharing information with stakeholders and the public. So communities know where to go to find that information. They can know where exactly, I'm a bit nervous about some flooding that's happening. Where do I go? Well, we've already got those products out there sitting, whether it's an experience builder or an instant app. As we've got that shared awareness for 24/7. But with this, we need to look to provide the answers to the core 4 principles here. So where is the danger? So am I going to be impacted? Where is there safety? Where do I need to go to be safe? And probably the key thing there is, how can I get there, or how do I get there? So we see fantastic examples of this with Gore, Marlborough, Auckland, already public information sitting there that public can go to and find out a bit more information. The Auckland Council Flood View is a fantastic resource. So again, if you haven't looked at it, go and look at the work that's already been done in the community and see how you could do something similar for your local community. So with that, I'll hand it back to Ed to talk about some success stories.
Awesome, thanks Andrew. And we're really lucky actually throughout this presentation already to show some success stories from a number of agencies, whether at the local, regional, national, or even the not-for-profit or non-government organisations, using GIS really successfully across emergency management. So we just wanted to highlight 3 that we saw recently with Ruwhenua that we love for what they've got in common and what they're doing both independently to an excellent degree. So we wanted to run down the beach and start with Baywatch from Bay of Plenty Emergency Management. So this is an ArcGIS online-based monitoring setup that enables shared awareness across all the different sources that are at the regional level, as we saw earlier. You need to be able to collate into a single picture to start understanding that level of need. What we love about this setup in particular, not just the name and the work of the analyst who's been working to create it, Josh Bogan, big shout out to you there in the Bay, is the training aspect that's been embedded inside this platform. So it's not just showing what, it's also showing how to operate these tools to enable that just-in-time training in an event. Sometimes you're not the staff member who's called upon at the day because you're at the other end of the country or just not available. So being able to have that redundancy in place, that just-in-time training to support these these is fantastic. So well done to Bay of Plenty Emergency Management Group. Coming down my end of the country, onto the mainland, we wanted to give a shout out to Canterbury Civil Defence and Emergency Management Group with a tool with the awesome acronym GCOP, or Geospatial Common Operating Picture, for those in the know. We love the fact that this is once again using the same technology and same configuration of the tools as Bay of Plenty, but tailored for that local regional flavour. And as you can see through the 3 images provided by the awesome analyst supporting the group there, Steve Ferris, it evolves and extends based on the type of hazard and the level of severity, whether it's wide-scale regional flooding, a local event that happened recently up in the Port Hills with the wildfires, and even integrating new sources as they're available and the day they're released, as we saw with the shaking layers for the Geraldine earthquake that happened a few months ago. This GCOP platform is able to evolve and consume in information sources as they become available and be flexible to a variety of response needs while answering the core critical commanders' information requirements. So great work to shout out to Steve there with the rest of the group in Canterbury. And so the final user story we wanted to focus on is the award-winning COP Intelligence Dashboard that has been a collaborative effort between Gisborne District Council and Tairawhiti Emergency Management Group. So kudos to the group there, once again using a similar setup of tools, but tailored for the regional need and the key information sources they rely on there. We love the fact that it integrates and leverages actually existing expertise and platforms that are available there in Gisborne. So actually using what they already have, but just configuring it and evolving it in a way that's super appropriate for the needs of that group across the 4 Rs. We can see here a screen grab from the video that was produced. Excellent work there, showing how it's been a digital transformation story for them, going from paper and whiteboards to interactive display that everyone can gather around and self-service the needs that they require from it. So a huge shout out to Orlo Dennison, Jet, Kume, and the rest of the guys up on the East Cape. Really solid effort, and once again, congratulations on your recent award for this work. So we managed to rip through that content relatively quickly, and now we're at the conclusion. So we just wanted to give you a bit of key takeaways to go away with. What should you have gotten from all of these examples we've been able to show across the 4Rs and across the country? Well, location-based intelligence is key to emergency management across a variety of workflows. You've seen how GIS supports activities across all phases of disaster risk reduction. And hopefully I'm sitting there watching either live, I'm here on the call now with a handful of others from across the country to name a few, or whether you're watching this recording after the fact, you'll see that there's so many opportunities available to collaborate, utilize the tools and extend what you already have across your organizational and geographic boundaries. We're really lucky to have an engaged community of practice called GEMA, who we just wanted to shout out, Geospatial Emergency Management Aotearoa. Give that a Google and connect in through their community forum, which is based on Slack. A lot of the work that you've seen here today has come off the back of conversations had in that forum, really a town square digitally to share different ideas and techniques and help each other in their times of need. I'm now going to hand over to Andrew to just give you a bit of a touch point on different resources that we have available for emergency management. Andrew.
Cheers, Ed. So for our resources that we've got, we've always got blogs. So looking at the product, so the Esri information, we can go and check out the documentation or the blogs. But at the end of the day, in an emergency, don't hesitate. Contact the EM support at eagle.co.nz. Email or check out our Eagle Emergency Hub. We've got a whole heap of resources there and information on what happens in an emergency. So go and check that out. And if you've got any questions, just reach out to that EM support email. Ed and myself are at the other end of it, so we'll look to respond as best as we can. But also upcoming training. So we also have a ArcGIS for emergency management workshop, which will run over 2 days on demand. So if you have up to 18 participants, we'll look to run that course. You can find out more at the eagle.co.nz/learn, so a training website, to find more about how that course can be run. As well as a couple major events coming up. So we're looking at running the Emergency Management Summit again at Takanini in Wellington on the 22nd and 23rd of September. This is before conference, so this is on the Sunday and the Monday before the main event, which is New Zealand Esri User Conference that's run for the rest of that week. And upcoming webinars. So continuing on in the series, we have implementing more of the ArcGIS system on the 1st of August, followed by ArcGIS Online, managing content and credits. And then last to finish off August, which will be the last one, I believe, before conference, is overview of licensing in ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. Again, go to the training website, eagle.co.nz/learn to go and find out more information about any of these opportunities. And that brings us to the Q&A.
So we realise that we're nearing a little bit of end of time here. We're going to continue to run the Q&A, but for those who have to step away for their critical tasks, we just wanted to give the opportunity to once again, on behalf of Andrew and I, thank you for your time that you've given this morning to attend this webinar. We hope you've learnt heaps that you're able to immediately apply for your organisation and the stakeholders you work with. And just thank you very much for the work that you do across this space. Hopefully we'll see you in peacetime, in readiness, reduction or recovery. But if we see you in response, we're here to help. So we're going to stop the recording now and go into a Q&A for those who have attended. But thank you very much for your time and effort in watching this webinar. We've really enjoyed having you.